clearest issue. So I'm glad Maina K will be here for a very, very long time indeed. So he'll keep trending anytime we have an election petition, whether it's presidential or any other, because of the development of the jurisprudence in this regard.
Okay, and for those who are wondering who this Maina Kiai is, I've stolen an image here from Getty. But this is the man, and the reason I will never forget this man is because he once had a conversation with Barack Obama over Barack's progress in quitting cigarettes. And Barack's mic was hot. So internationally, it's called a hot mic, where it's on and you forget that it is on. So even in the international scene, the name is one that shredded. Did Maina Kiai, Professor Sihanya, the judgment in that case, also address the voter register? Was it one of the issues? Because I remember just before we went to the polls, that was a hot issue. Now that we're talking about hot mics, hot issue on whether the physical register and the KIMS kit should be used in tandem. Is that one of the issues?
It wasn't a key issue in that, because that issue then would come in what we were dealing with, what called the use of technology and the question of what is a complementary system. Focus a lot more on that issue. So in Maina Kiai, it was largely tangential. It was not a big issue. That is what came up in a case that went up to the Court of Appeal on the use of technology and the question of what is a complementary system, which again has come back. And that issue of complementary system had arisen from the Orengo Kiraitu Committee that was looking at Section 44 of the Elections Act, and then gave us Section 44A, capital A, whereby the question of what we need to have a system of voter identification, the question of the register issues, which should be physical and should be also be digital, and how do you do EVID, electronic voter identification? What if the KIMS kit failed? And you know that in 2013 they did not fail, technology did not fail, but technology was failed deliberately. Those were some of the issues that were in a different case. They were clear in that case, yes.
Okay.
And again, that case came up for reinterpretation. I think the Court of Appeal, just on the eve of the election, just said that a brief ruling. I think it was a 2 to 3 pager. First a 2 pager, revised to a 3 pager by quoting what was decided in the Court of Appeal in 2017, and saying that we are still at that point of how to use KIMS kit, and in the event that you cannot easily be identified through that, then thank you.
Okay. I mean, so Prof, so the 4 commissioners have said that Chebukati's figure do not add up. Now, looking at the Supreme Court in 2017, there was a quote here: the duty to verify in Article 138 is squarely placed upon IEBC. This duty is exercised by the various agents, officers of IEBC, that is to say that the presiding officer at a polling station, the returning officer at the constituency level, and the chair at the national tally. In looking at what was happening at Bomas, were they tallying or were they verifying? And if that is the case, then does the announcement need a quorum or a plenary for the returning officer, Chebukati in this case, to make an announcement by a majority vote within the commission? That is where I think the confusion is at the moment.
And will it be an issue, one of the, in your projection, will it be one of the main issues the Supreme Court will be dealing with?
To begin with the last, that it will depend on the content of the petition, what the Supreme Court deals with on that issue. So the question of tallying and verification, what is that? And what is tallying, what is verification? In fact, one would even ask first, primarily, what is counting? And then what is tallying, what is verification? An issue that is likely to also arises in a lot of presidential election petitions is the question of what is scrutiny. But let me focus on the issues that you've raised, which is verifying and tallying. You have rightly pointed out that the question of verifying and tallying begins at verification at large extent begins at the polling station level, where the presiding officer PO works with the agents of the candidates to check whether this verification is right. And what is the basis of verification and tallying? It is the Constitution. It is Articles 81, etc., which require that whatever system of elections we have, it must be simple, it must be accurate, it must be verifiable, transparent, and accountable. And therefore, these then you go to the Elections Act, and you go to the IEBC Act, and then you go to the regulations. And so the process goes on. It starts with the presiding officer there, where we also have Maina Kiai still reigning supreme there. Then you go to for presidential elections are supposed to be conducted in constituencies. So you have the polling station is important, yes. So presiding officer and agents are important. Then you go to the constituency, whereby you have a returning officer who, working, as you pointed out, works with the agents and other officers of the commission. So it's a commission. You can see commission is being repeated. Then you come to here. There's a time that they used to put a lot of emphasis on the county for presidential elections. But it was argued that county is not strictly, it's not an electoral unit for presidential elections, constitutional electoral unit. It's largely administrative, political in presidential election. So that was an issue. So, so once you come, therefore, from constituencies, the 47 plus diaspora as a constituency, then you come to the national tallying center, which then, and that's where Article 138 says that the commission shall tally and verify. It doesn't say the chair or the national returning officer shall verify and tell. It is the commission, and the commission is read at this national level or generally to be commissioners and the relevant officers. And then, in this case, what happened was that even Mr. Chebukati developed with the commissioners a protocol which we were using in the verification. In fact, I was a verification clerk there. I was one of the verification clerks and tallying clerks. And their protocol, he signed them. And it acknowledged the role of agents, the role of the commissioners, the role of the chair of the commission, etc., etc. So things would go back and forth, and I don't know whether we'll discuss the details of that later. But the point is that there is verification and tallying is a qualitative and quantitative process. It's an issue of, do the numbers add up? Are the numbers accurate? And that Maina K recognizes that there may be arithmetic and clerical errors. Yes. Mistakes, and especially we noticed quite a number, some are substantial and serious, some are like they don't affect or materially affect the outcome. So, because many times when these POs are signing those forms, sometimes everybody is so tired there, and sometimes there are some clerical errors, which you can, if you check, it's not too bad, but some can be fundamental. That's quantitative. Qualitative is about where does this form have the security features? Was it signed by the relevant people? And in some cases, we were finding that some people allegedly signed for Zimio, etc., etc. Those are some of the qualitative and serious issues that one needs. We should be here listening to. Those are very serious issues. So there is qualitative and quantitative verification and tallying.
So my understanding then is IEBC commissioners at this point, they do not cast, count, or tally the votes. So you have the commissioners, you have the desks that were there in the auditorium where they were going through the different stages of verification. There were error logs that were in place in the event that numbers don't add up. But the final tallies are at the polling stations, as you refer to the Maina Kiai case. So if the work of the commission is to get the official results from the officers, the IBC officers, that look, we verified these numbers, they add up before adding them to the Form 34C. Then, is the commission then supposed to do a vote on what the final tally should be, which now in this case it's Chebukati who makes that announcement? Should they all agree and then say, fine, this is the figure we all agree with, now we can announce? Do they cast a vote? If they disagree, does that then nullify that the numbers are wrong? Because the chair is duty bound to make that announcement by law either way.
Yeah, let me emphasize, for the avoidance of doubt, that really, yes, the chair has the duty, the obligation, and the power to make the declaration. But then let's step back. Mm-hmm. It's the final result, final decision of a process. It's the outcome of a process. So I've read in social media, I've read in print media, I've heard people saying that, you know, presiding officers and polling station presiding officers, POs, and constituency returning officers can just take those results, give them to the chair, and lo and behold, the chair declares, absolutely not, that's unconstitutional, illegal, unlawful, irregular. Because Article 138 tells us in a clear English. In fact, the control, one of the reasons why the control is so, Professor Nwenya here was mentioning about the fact that many, even non-lawyers, can discuss the Constitution. One of the reasons is because it was decided that the control be written in English, rather than what I would call Nairobi or Kenyan English, rather than in legalese. Notwithstanding, those things are no longer in the Constitution, which was a way of lawyers hiding things. So the Article 138 is written in English, Kenya and Nairobi English, which is basically the commission shall tally and verify. It doesn't say the chairperson. Where the commission wants to say chairperson, it says so. It is in clear English. So it is the commission, and the commission is a commission consisting of 7 commissioners with a chair part of the commission. The chair is not the commission, and with officers. And from the floor, I think a quick maybe correction or clarification is that actually the commission was presiding over the verification and tallying at Bomas, because they would work. Of course, they ought to, because as the 4 have said, in so many situations, even then they were just hearing about it. But according to the Constitution, they ought to be presiding over the verification, so that the staff, because there are 7 commissioners, they can't do all these tasks alone. They then delegate, it's delegated power to the staff to work with the agents and tallying clerks like, and verification clerks like some of us. So it was the commission that was supposed to be, and we were given the impression by Chairman Chebukati that the commission was actually involved. But the 4, okay, are indicating that otherwise. Lastly, on this point, that then you are saying that can they vote? This is a major issue which has been arising, because I've read, and even yesterday I read, and in the social media elsewhere, and heard people saying that Kenyans have voted. And they've decided who their president-elect would be or president would be. Is it the duty of 7 commissioners? Do they have the power to decide then? Yes, they have the power to do tallying and verification. That is this exactly, are these the numbers that the Kenyans decided? So it's a technical process that they have to. They are not saying that, and the regulations are clear, the schedule to the IEBC Act, that the commission must have a quorum, that number 1. Number 2, the commission ought to decide on can decide unanimously or by consent, by consensus. But in the event there is not unanimity, just like in any situation in most boards and commissions, then the majority, and surely 4 over 7 are, because they can just say this, those numbers don't add up. That is the decision they are making. That they're not just nullifying all that the numbers are not there. They are saying that you are coming from Kiambu, you are claiming that these were the numbers, these are not the numbers. So let us work on this and share that decision with the agents. And they are supposed to listen to the agents. through public participation.
I mean, Prof, before Olive just comes in quickly
yes.
on that last point.
Yes.
So, according to the Constitution, the chair, in this case, Wafula Chebukati, was duty-bound to make that announcement before that time lapsed.
Yes.
So, is there a provision in the Constitution or in the law which then explains what happens in the event that the commissioners don't agree and the majority dissent? What then needs to happen?
What needs to happen is that there are constitutional principles, but there is specific IEBC schedule, which says that if they disagree, which means they are not unanimous, which means that there is no consensus, then we go by the majority decision. And that's why they would be saying that, for instance, why are our tallies exceeding 100%? I know people are playing with the issue of 100.01, what it means. We are missing the major point. The major point is that the number of should not exceed 100, full stop. If they exceed 100%, there's a fundamental constitutional problem.
I am seeing his ears have packed up. And we are wading into now your area.
If they exceed by even one, if they exceed 100% by even one, there is a serious problem. Because here you are not supposed to be rounding off. What are you rounding off? A vote is a vote. A vote is not rounded off. There should be
there was talk of decimals, but I'll leave that to Prof. Omenya. And Prof, we are wading into now this area of dissenting IEBC commissioners. This is why we rejected the Chebukati tally of presidential election. This report by Brian Ambani, and there was a lot of talk, Prof, on social media about this animal that is 0.01 that was raised by the commissioners. And I remember yesterday, the one thing that yourself and Newton Hamasi, who is actually the Democratic Party spokesperson and not, we baptized him Dennis, an advocate. But the one thing that you two agreed on was perhaps the commission knows something, these four commissioners, know something that the rest of us were not privy to. What did you make of their explanation? Because now they came back, still at Serena, where some were claiming they're being held hostage, not verified, but still at Serena, and now got into more detail, apart from now just calling the end of the exercise opaque.
Right. No, thank you. I think generally the whole country was waiting, not just for the Right Honorable Prime Minister's statement, but also for these commissioners, since they mentioned that they were going to provide a lot more detail. And then, of course, they came and suggested that Chebukati's decision around the declaration of the results was actually not unanimous. It was the chairman's own decision, and the four had actually dissented. And then, of course, they mentioned the fact that some of those tallying figures were not actually adding up. I think, again, as a layman, I think this left me more confused than clarity as far as that particular matter was concerned. And the reason why it left me confused, and I think that's why now the constitutional experts, the lawyers, are actually coming in. Two things. Number one, that I'd always assumed that I understood Article 138(10) that spells out the declaration of the results and the role of the chair, in that particular article. And I think Ben, Prof here will actually highlight that further, because that article does not mention the commission. It mentions specifically the chair of the commission.
Prof, so sorry to just interject there. Need to fix your mic again. At this point, we just want to take a quick break.
Prof, I told you, somebody is sabotaging.
The math is not mathing.
Yeah, and when we come back, as hopefully we'll have his sound sorted out, very optimistic, 100.01% sure we'll have it sorted out. When you come back, Carol, also think about this. You mentioned accepting and moving on. And Kenyans are saying they're tired. What do you make of all these congratulatory messages that are coming out of the international community? I have opened just two, but there are a number. Cyril Ramaphosa here saying, I offer my warm congratulations to President-elect William Ruto of the Republic of Kenya. A prosperous and united Kenya is an important prerequisite for and contributor to a prosperous and peaceful continent. And he continues to say, we look forward to working with you in pursuit of hashtag the Africa we want. And Paul Kagame, closer home, says, on behalf of the government and the people of Rwanda, I congratulate our brothers and sisters, the people of Kenya, for conducting peaceful elections on the 9th of August 2022. I also congratulate His Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto, the President-elect. Are they sending us a message that perhaps we need to accept and move on? All that on the other side of the break.
Dust off your Subaru and upgrade your Lexus, because Coop Bank is now offering 100% financing on used cars. With Coop Bank pre-owned car financing, anyone with an income can walk into a second-hand dealership, select the car that best suits them and get financing from Cooperative Bank. To find out more, walk into a Cooperative Bank near you for details. Terms and conditions apply.
The music right here on Nation FM is on another level. We're playing the best hits, the biggest hits, right here on 96.3 Nation FM. My name is Antonio Soul. It's the Nation FM Drive every single weekday, Monday to Friday, from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. The best hits, the best conversation, the best guests. It's all about entertainment, business, politics, and everything in between. Call me Sugar, because I keep it sugar and spice and all things nice.
Everybody round. If you don't come home with me right now, then I am going to file a case against you for abandonment.
Mrs. Marissa, the garage just called to tell you that your car is already fixed and you can go and pick it up today.
And how could you think of just leaving after the bomb you dropped on me? You are not leaving until this has been cleared up.
Mom!
Well, if I sleep over at your house during the weekend, what do you think of that?
It had to be you.
Welcome to the NBA Finals.
Now this is a celebration.
The finals, when 60-foot prayer can get answered at the buzzer.
It's more like 61 feet.
I mean, you gotta be great from game 1 and game 7.
Because when the champagne stops popping,
Does anybody know what's left?
Legendary status, my man.
yes, Dirk, exactly. Oh my greatness.
Dave, this line is not going down, and you're burning up. But I'll sort you out, my friend. See that barrier? Go for it. Yeah.
Bing bang bing. Bum, bum.
Join Property Focus every week as we walk you through some of the latest house designs, property, hot deals on land for sale, modern furniture, trendy kitchens, finishes, and also get to hear experts' opinions on matters architecture, building construction, and real estate. Now, catch the show with me, Peter and Gigi, every Sunday at 5:30 p.m. only on NTV. Let's go.
Jina langu ni Bire the Vocalist, na kupata wimbo huu kama sikiza tune yako ni jambo rahisi sana. Bonyeza *812 *802# na Mungu atawabariki. Skiza na Nation, supporting local talent.
They say that the aim of a constitutional democracy is to safeguard the rights of the minority while avoiding the tyranny of the majority.
Flag bearer wetu ni
is that in politics, nothing happens by accident.
Nani alisaidia Uhuru Kenyatta 2013 akawa rais?
Opinion is the medium between knowledge and ignorance.
Raila anaweza kuwa projects.
That's where we as a fourth estate come in to separate the wheat from the chaff, fact from fiction. Dissecting for you the biggest political and governance issues in the Republic in the way only we can. Keeping tabs on the pulse of the nation.
Front and Center, Thursday nights on NTV.
Magic.
This is NTV.
Welcome back to AM Live. We are interrogating 0.01. This is what the commissioners had to say. Take notice that Mr. Chebukati's aggregation, this is the 4 commissioners who've dissented, and instead of calling them the new commissioners versus the old, take notice that Mr. Chebukati's aggregation as follows: Raila Odinga 48.85%, William Ruto 50.49%, Wahiga More 0.23%, Wajakoya George 0.44%. This brings the total to 100.01%, the commissioner said, which presents, and I quote, a mathematical absurdity that defies logic. The 0.01% translates to approximately 142,000 votes, which would make a significant difference in the final results. And Cherera, butt of jokes in online maths debate. Prof, from the conversation we were having off camera, in the course of the break, you're saying, you and Carol were saying perhaps we are being unfair. Proceed, Prof.
No, thank you. I think the issue is what were the commissioners saying? What did they want to communicate to Kenya? And how did they communicate it? And I think, of course, we're using mathematical language this time around, not legal language. And I think they ended up saying 2 contradictory things. In this sense, I mean, they said that this was coming to 100.01%. And as long as you say percent, then it comes to 1,400 and something, so it becomes negligible. But if they meant that it was 0.01 of the votes cast, then that would come to 142,000 votes. That then actually becomes significant. Yes, of course. Even as we look at the numbers, the key question here is that what did they actually intend to communicate? Because clearly there are 2 contradictory positions here. If they said that there was a significant number of votes that were not catered for, and to me, I think that's what they actually wanted to pass around, that this is a significant number of votes, totaling 142,000 plus, that particular figure that they actually highlighted there, then that would actually be a different percentage. It would be 0.01 of the total votes cast. But of course, if they were strictly speaking mathematically, and saying, you know, the variance was 0.01%, then that actually becomes negligible. But this, of course, we're discussing it, and we say numbers are political. I personally work with numbers, and I hate percentages. In this sense, you go and talk to 2 people, and then you know, one person agrees with you on an issue, the other one dissents. Instead of saying that one person agreed with me, you say 50% of the people I talk to agree with me. This is where number becomes political.
Yes.
People assume that you talked with, say, if it's Kenyan issues, they assume you talk to, say, 23 million people. But the truth of the matter is that you only talk to one person. So I think sometimes use of percentages, and for me, I hate that very much, because government has come and told us that, you know, 50% of people are being provided with this and that service, 50% of the people agreed and so on. But when you get inside and ask, what are these 50%? Sometimes the numbers are insignificant, but sometimes the numbers are shocking. They're saying, what? You mean so many Kenyans are not accessing these services and so on. So I think, again, like Prof was saying, I think some of these things, the Constitution is written in plain English, but I think the people outside there should also be using plain mathematics and plain numbers instead of bamboozling us with the percentages and algorithms and all those sort of things. They should have just said that they think the variance in terms of the number of votes is 142,000. And Kenyans would have understood that, oh, you mean, because if you look at 142,000 and you can relate it with 233 votes by which the president-elect was elected, that becomes significant. But you know, if you're saying 0.0, there was a variance of 0.01%, then this is even confusing mathematicians, leave alone ordinary Kenyans outside there, whom were the ones they were actually addressing. Okay. So my own counsel to people who want to communicate clearly is say whatever you want to say as simply as possible. If the numbers were 142,000, that to me is huge. That is very, very significant. Just say so. Just say about over 142,000 votes were not created. Why are you hiding in mathematics? Why are you coming in and now starting to say, you know, this didn't add up? And those could be by the ways. But tell us the message that you actually want, you know, to pass on.
Okay, and speaking of the message that they want to pass on, you know, I'm a Kenyan and I'm an expert, therefore, being a Kenyan, I'm an expert at non-verbal cues, at reading non-verbal communication. You know, the way when Uhuru and Ruto would walk together and we'd be like, yes, he's frowning, he didn't shake his hand. Anyway, so I can tell that Dennis Okari has a burning question. But Caroline, before he comes in, I had asked you the question on the international community congratulating William Ruto on becoming a president-elect, but you also said that we're getting bogged down, so perhaps you can address this first. You also said during the break, and I'm revealing our secrets, but you said we're getting bogged down on this 0.01% and not the totality of the message that these 4 dissenting IEBC commissioners passed yesterday.
Correct. So on the 0.01, I just want to quote Dr. Chaumbogo, who tweeted and said 2 options. To convert 0.01 into a percentage first, she said this in a tweet. To use 0.01 as it is, as it's already part of a percentage, whatever is the truth mathematically is the answer. And I found that to be a very interesting tweet, because we've said here all week, numbers are political. As Prof here was saying, the whole, and I'm actually quoting, the whole process of the vote tallying and processing is both qualitative and quantitative. Quantitatively, if you speak like what Prof, the Prof on, I've got a Prof on my right and the Prof on my left. Prof on my left was saying, because I'm a qual researcher and I actually hate percentages, because when my students go out and do research and they speak to 4 people, they come back and do a chart and they tell me 25%, because 1 out of the 4 people, 25% of the people agreed that ABCD. That's a qualitative problem. But if you go and talk to 1 million people and 25%, which Prof is what the Prof to my left has said. Now, 0.01% was only one issue. Correct. And that issue raised what they were calling the 142,000 votes. So that for them was issue number 1. Right. Issue number 2 is that they said the results did not indicate the total numbers of registered voters, valid votes cast, and rejected votes. And so the argument is that the 50.4% is hanging in the air. And we've said here all week, numbers are contextual. So here the question they're raising is 50.4% of what? When that is not clear, then that number becomes, it's hanging in the air. So that was their point number 2. Point number 3 was that the result of the presidential election appears to have been hijacked by the chair of the IEBC, Wafula Chebukati, while the regulations, and I think Prof to my right has alluded to this, there is a protocol, there's a role of agents and the role of the commissioners. So to allude and to suggest that Chebukati was being dictatorial in saying, these are the results, I don't need anybody to ask me anything about these results, we are announcing. So that again brings to the fore, what are the roles of all the commissioners?
Right.
And that is something I think that is going to be discussed at the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court will pronounce itself on this. And I think going forward, we are going to get regulations. What happens when there are dissenting voices, etc.
And I'm also curious to hear from Professor Sihanya.
Yes.
Traditionally, sorry, I have my keyboard out because you said, who was that who tweeted, Dr. Charo?
Chaumbogo.
Chaumbogo, okay,
Yes.
I'll look that up. But I'm curious to know, because previously IEBC has been represented in these petitions as a party.
Yes.
Correct. But now the IEBC is divided.
That's interesting. And that division goes back to what we've been discussing here all week. The independence, because what is happening here is that now it means that the IEBC is in itself has partisan interests. And what these four commissioners are suggesting, because we also discussed and said, their comments can be very opaquely presented. It appears that one side of the commission was pro one side and the other side was pro the other side. So that was point number 3. Point number 4, which will allude to point number 1 on the 142,000, is that results from some of the constituencies had not been announced by the time of announcing the presidential result. What that told me, my interpretation of that statement, is that if you consider the 142,000, and then you consider the numbers in these other constituencies that had not been announced, there is a potential that the difference between the president-elect Ruto and Raila Odinga was what? What was the difference between them in terms of the votes?
It was
233,000.
Yes,
And what they're suggesting is that if you add the 142,000 to the results that had not been announced, they have the potential to surpass the 233,000 that was the difference between the two contenders, which therefore then means that the result was prematurely announced. That was my reading of when I put the 4 points together. If we put aside the whole mathematics, or as some people were calling it, mathemagics and and all those things. Putting that aside, if we are to combine these 4 points, they appear to be making a very significant statement. Again, going back to what you said yesterday, was the timing right? No. Can we go back and ask what would have been the correct timing? At what point we have to consider that if the IEBC was partisan from the beginning, at what point would it have been appropriate for the commissioners to come out and say, by the way, we are having issues in the boardroom, we appear to be partisan right from the beginning. Would that have been the correct timing to do that? Again, now here we are working with, with hindsight. So to me, that speaks to a larger issue that I've been raising here. How independent is the IEBC? How independent are the IEBC commissioners? And to go back very quickly to the question you're asking about the congratulatory messages, what the president of Rwanda said to me is very significant. The Africa we want. If you see, majority of these messages are coming from African leaders. So there is a sense that African leaders, regional leaders, are closing ranks, and they're saying, we accept these verdicts by the Kenyan people, and we want to move on, and we don't care if the international community are not necessarily pronouncing themselves on this. This is the Africa we want. So already I'm seeing a narrative emerging here that African leaders are saying, this is it. We do not, and of course we could have debates around that. Is it that African leaders, by the nature of how our African leaders are they saying that these prolonged electioneering processes are not conducive to them? That's a question we can discuss. This is a different political issue. But for me, that's what I'm saying. I'm seeing majority of these messages are coming from African and regional leaders, and for me, that's a very significant thing to note.
Okay, and before I pass it back to Dennis again, I have read his nonverbal cues.
Yes.
So 2 things, Prof, also as you're addressing the issue of divided IEBC heading into the Supreme Court, how will they be represented. Okay, and yesterday Dennis asked the question of them bearing witness. I suggested that in the Supreme Court it would be by swearing affidavits, so you can also provide clarity on that. Also, I remember covering the 2017 presidential election, first round.
Right.
I was at the Bomas of Kenya.
Right.
And when Chebukati came up to the podium, he said, like, he went through the results for the various counties to show that the candidate has secured at least 25%. The winning candidate has secured at least 25% in 24 counties. That did not happen this time. Is the chairman required to do so? And I think, if I heard you correctly, Caroline, you raised the issue of we were waiting for some constituencies to be announced by the IEBC. When all of this, we saw the floor cleared and the announcement, declaration of who the winner was being made. Unless I blinked and I missed it, I don't think that was the case. Was he required to do so to announce all the constituency, 34 Bs, and the counties before declaring who the president-elect was or is? And you talked about tweets by Dr. Chao Mbogo. So who is she? I can see here, and I will rely on you as my verification, Caroline. But PhD, computer science, educator, founder, and CEO, Kami Ilimu, instructor at Course RA. So she said in her tweets, the tweet you're making reference to, so that we are all on the same page. And I had it here. Did I lose it? And she was talking about that 0 point. Here it is. 2 options, she says. First of all, she says, this time round, all Kenyans will do math. From people tallying results last week to the Supreme Court of Kenya, who may do algebra soon, to determine if it's 1,400 or for 140,000, or is it 0.01 or 0.01%? Or is it just a round-off, or are they just figures to be ignored? And she continues to say, who says algebra isn't fun? So she says 2 options, the tweet you read out to us, to convert 0.01 into a percentage first, to use 0.01 as it is, as it's already part of a percentage. Whatever is the truth mathematically is the answer. All right, Professor Sihanya, maybe those questions I posed before Dennis volleys a couple of his own.
So the questions about 100.01, well, and the question of percent, or 0.01 of of the total number of relevant votes. I think she's answered it.
No, not that one. The 2 questions were IEBC going into the Supreme Court. How are they going to the Supreme Court? They're divided.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one statement about that. This should be seen in the totality of the questions that they raised, which were really fundamental for us, and she has argued very, very clearly. So let's go to the questions you posed to me. How will I divided IBC be represented? Should there be a petition? Well, the record of election petitions, presidential election petitions, let me focus on that, since which arose from 1992, because Kenyans may forget that the first time we had a presidential election in Kenya was 1992.
Not 2013?
1992, after the 1992 elections. Yes. And that's the first time we had a presidential election. Correct. 30 years after independence. Yes. Because, and that's why we still have a lot of problems with presidential elections. Because they were not being conducted anyway. Yes. So the first time we have conducted a presidential election, and it was properly manipulated, then we had 1992. And what the leading case...
I think I was too young to remember.
The leading case there was, I was already in law school, and the leading case there was Matiba v. Moi. Americans would call it V, or versus Moi. And it was decided basically by technicality. You didn't sign the petition personally. Okay, so, but the point is, the point I wanted to make there, consistently, 1992, Matiba v. Moi, 1997, Kibaki v. Moi, etc., etc., 2002, there was no petition.
There was no petition.
07, there was none. Then you have 2013, Raila won, etc. You will see that consistently in these election petitions, especially presidential, the chair of the electoral management body that is ECK or IEBC,
yes,
is normally a respondent.
Yes.
The chair as chair, partly because of the role of a returning officer. Then IEBC is also many times, most cases, the Electoral Management Board, EMB, IEBC, ECK is a respondent in their own space. And of course, others may be respondents. So the question here is normally that, again, we come back to Maina Kiai, the point on IEBC chair vis-a-vis commission. The appointment of IEBC lawyers is a procurement process, etc., and it should be oversighted by the commissioners. But in the past, there have been serious claims, serious allegations that in many cases the chairs have been the one influencing or directly procuring lawyers to act both for the chair and for the commission. And that could also bring a serious constitutional question, especially in a divided commission. So one would have expected, of course, it's a procurement process where procurement is basically a management issue, but oversighted, because commission is so important, and the commission is not the chair. Because commission, what is this role? I think more recently we have had a lot of debate about commissions in this country until there was statutory guidance, legislative guidance, to say that commission versus management. That commission's role is policy, strategy, and oversight. So that's not an individual's role. It's a commission's role on the oversighting how they procure the lawyers. So there could be an issue on that. I think the other issue you talked about, was it about 25% in...
yes, was the chairman required to declare all those results prior to the final?
It's a constitutional requirement that it should be 25% of at least more than half, which is 20, at least 24 of the counties. And if there is a clear constitutional requirement, if you like, imperative or constitutional stipulation or constitutional mandatory requirement, then you must demonstrate. There must be evidence that you say that in this these are the counties in which the alleged president-elect had more than 25%, at least 25%. And I think that's why the four commissioners were saying, we were just being told that the president-elect has this and the next candidate has this in these counties. But we are not being told, you must say, registered voters there were this. That's in the tables by the forms 34A, 34, especially 34C, requires that you would say these are the number of candidates. Sorry, the registered voters. Then you go to the valid votes cast, and then the actual figures that then you convert to percentage. You can't just put there a percentage. Percentage of what? Correct. Percent of what? So that was a requirement, which is also a failure on the chair's part. And this issue of the some constituencies that had not been announced is also very, very important. And again, that brings us back to the 0.01, because they would be, it appears that they would be exceeding 100%. Correct. And that here, the figures would be so important because we have to talk about 50% plus. In fact, in Kenya, the issue of one vote, every vote counts, is much more serious in a presidential election than in any other election. That's true. One vote. Correct. Because it must be shown that you passed the threshold by one vote. Yeah. And if you are to knock off some votes, and some people are calculating it at about just 57,000, right, from the alleged president-elect, you don't have 50% plus one. So it was important to announce everything, both as a matter of process, but a matter of that it probably would affect the computation of 50% plus one. There are only a few cases where the law allows that if the unannounced results are not going to affect the outcome. But in this case, the threshold that was alleged to have been passed is passed by very few. The numbers are quite limited. And therefore, you ought to have announced, but as a requirement of announcing this, because the other one is called announcement. of various constituencies called announcement. The declaration, and I know that there has been a lot of debate on what is to announce and what is to declare in elections. Those other individuals are called announcements in a presidential election. Then the declaration is that so and so, these were registered, valid, garnered, votes garnered, percentage, 50% plus 1, the following in the following constituencies, and you should even name those constituencies. Exactly. So this process, Mr. Chebukati really short-circuited the process for reasons that are because of his sponsors.
I mean, Prof, Raila declared this is going to be a legal battle to nullify Ruto's win. And looking at the statement, the joint statement of the 4 commissioners yesterday, is there a case, if we just look at the statement of the 4 commissioners, before we even look at what Raila would petition, is there a case? Because I'm quoting their statement, and they said, while distancing themselves, they said the results of the presidential election belong to Chebukati himself and do not represent a declaration and announcement by the IEBC as a commission. Therefore, the commission had to process the results before they are declared and announced by the chairperson, which in this case didn't happen. The second thing is that in their statement, they still say that the Chebukati failed to announce the total number of valid votes cast, which they said raises questions over the figures that were then used in the final tally. Now, I want to go to the other figure. There's the 0.01 we're talking about. The other figures now that they mentioned, they took note that Chebukati claimed that Raila Odinga attained 25% of votes in 34 counties, while William Ruto attained 25% in 39 counties. The question is then, which figures in the 34 and 39 counties constitutes to the variables that warranted Chebukati to make that conclusion? That's their argument. The conclusion of 25% in 34 counties and 25% in 39 counties for Raila and Ruto respectively. Did what Chebukati announced did it open a door to legal challenges? Already we are seeing the 4 commissioners challenging Chebukati's announcement, and they're also raising now other issues that were happening behind closed doors. I can start to you, Professor Omena.
No, thank you for this. And I remember yesterday when we were discussing on this same show, and the question came whether there was a case in the first instance. My position was again that look, I mean, for now we don't have adequate information to even make that layman decision whether that's the case or not. But my argument still was that the reason why the Supreme Court is there and all these legal processes are there is so that people can seek redress on the basis of the information they have. And I said, look, let's not speculate, because the 4 commissioners were there. And Azimio as a party has been there across the entire process. They've not had a chance to explain exactly what could have gone wrong with that particular process. And my position was that we should give them a chance to actually highlight, the issues that they actually had. Because on the periphery of it, I mean, fellows were doing joint tallying on the basis of 34 A's and B's that were uploaded in the system and saying, oh, there's some sort of concurrence as it were with the result that was announced. But then, we come to a very basic issue here, actually, and let me revisit the percentage issue again, because I think it is still going to be an issue. I'm actually declaring a percentage, and some votes have not actually come in. So the percentage I'm declaring, what is it exactly? Is it a percentage of the votes I've counted versus the votes cast, or is it a percentage of the votes I've counted? Yes, of the votes I've counted. The votes that a candidate has received versus the votes I've counted. Of course, we expect that this will be a percentage of the votes cast. The votes have counted as a percentage of the votes cast, because every single vote cast must actually be accounted for as it actually were. Yeah, and in a close election, and I think this is something that we've been discussing across board. We discussed this about the media tallying and so on, and I think one of the reasons why the media was very afraid to announce their results was that this election was always close.
Yes.
And any simple error could materially change the outcome of the election. And that's why we agreed that, yes, let the media be called cowards, but the risk of announcing a wrong result because of inaccuracies in tallying, should be avoided at all costs. So yes, people can create all these bats of jokes and whatever it is, but even the final result that has come out there, 233,000 nationally, with so many votes not counted, with elections cancelled in a few areas here and there, is significant in my view. And that means that there's duty of care that is expected of IEBC to determine when this win is actually a clear win. And I think when commissioners are coming in and saying, look here, regardless of the legalese, look here, whatever has been declared by the commission is contestable in terms of whether the candidate that won in this particular instance, President-elect Ruto, whether he could have still won if all these factors were considered. And I think it's important because that margin is actually close.
It's very close.
But whether you look at it as percentage or you look at it in terms of absolute votes. And I think in any contest, when the contest is very, very close, and the rules then become more and more important.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's partly why I feel that what Azimio is doing is actually the correct thing. Sorry to, in a layman's term, and I keep referring to soccer rules, you can imagine a situation where a team wins by 1 goal, in the 99 minutes, and that goal is actually a penalty that was given on the basis of a player touching the ball, and nobody actually saw that the player touching the ball.
That's why they introduced the VAR.
That is exactly, that's so close. So you have to go back and scrutinize and look at the VAR and, summon all these guys and so on and verify whether that was a goal. But of course, if you have been beaten 10-0 and this is one of the goals, it's very easy to just ignore the outcome of that match because it would not fundamentally change the outcome and the result. And that's why I think, regardless of what the Kenya Kwanza people feel, we are starting to hear information, to get stories, to find what is missing in terms of, information that could, I'm not saying they would, but that could potentially change the result of this election since it was too close. And I think that's partly why the Azimio side must also be given a chance to explain their position and why they think that, if those issues were addressed, both in terms of how the commission conducted itself and in terms of the actual numbers and figures that were put on the table, that maybe the outcome of this election could be materially different.
I mean, Carol,
Yes.
there are those who have bashed these 4 commissioners, there are those who are supporting them. But is there a case in the statement with the, quoting the figures and what Chebukati failed to announce and what he omitted and so on and so forth? Just looking at those, again, we still go back to the issue of percentages.
Yes.
I don't like numbers myself, but looking at the case they're fronting, was there an open door for Chebukati to make that final announcement without these other numbers coming in mind, bearing in mind that maybe in their own understanding or their arrangement, they felt these numbers will not alter the figures, even if they complete the tally, though we're saying this thing was still too close to call.
Yes. So in a technical sense, the Constitution allows for when a candidate hits that sweet spot, 50% plus 1, you can be very ready to call the election, regardless of whether some few constituency numbers have not come in. Having said that, in a very close election such as this one, where the gap, so in 2017, the gap was about 2 million, or was it 1 million or something like that? Even if we went back and said the difference is 142,000 here, it's the same analogy.
Correct.
If we win by 10 goals and you're disputing 2 goals, we still have 8 good goals that we scored. So at the end of the day, we still, win.
Exactly.
But if you only win by 1 goal, and that goal is disputed, then it means we have to listen. So do they have a case? I don't want to say no, And I know, you know, I said this in the beginning, everybody is tired by this process. Right. We need children to go back to school. We need businesses to come back up. But I'm also a long-term thinker. I don't want in 2032
to be having the same issue.
When Professor Omenya here is running for president, this same issue comes up, and then we say we should have taken this to the Supreme Court for the court to declare itself on this matter, so that we don't have to keep dealing with these same issues over and over again. And I want to make reference to something that, for me, also goes into the percentages. These 4 commissioners, and I know the veracity, the integrity of these commissioners is on the line. We have already seen them being called the Uhuru commissioners. You know, we have photographs that are circulating around on social media, even on Twitter right now as we speak, you know, which are casting aspersions on the integrity of these 4 commissioners. Were they planted there, and I'm going to use that word loosely in quotes, were they planted there to cause some mischief or to make this election sway one side? That could be a truth. But it's also up to us to examine the issues they raise, because again, we don't want to deal with these issues in 2027 and 2032, where I'm hoping, you know, even I can decide to run for an office, etc., etc. They actually said that the cumulative result at the back end was accessed only by Chebukati, which is actually what they alluded to. And therefore, they're saying that while the chair had the sole mandate to declare the results, which I think is part of the question you're asking, the commissioners must be involved in the process. And Prof, to my right, talked about the process and the outcome. So these commissioners are talking about a process in which, to go back to the word they used the other day, that there was opaqueness. They did not even have access to the back end. They did not specify what that back end was. But when commissioners come out and say the chair was acting in a dictatorial manner, foisted these results on us and asked us to sign, and you know, and they actually mentioned a time, they said that, you know, they claimed that they found out the final results, which had been tallied by the technical officers at 4:30 p.m. And Chebukati never gave them a chance to even discuss the results. You know, it's like he was foisting these results on them. Those are things that we have to discuss. Again, what do the regulations say are the roles of the commissioners, each of the commissioners? What do the regulations say about access to this so-called back end that only Chebukati appears to have had access to? Do the regulations give them access to that back end? What is that back end? What does that access to that back end mean? Because we don't want to have rogue commissioners or a rogue chair of the IEBC having the potential, because when you talk about back end, we are now thinking about the server. We don't want to have potential where a rogue chair or a rogue commissioners, and please note, I'm not making reference to Chebukati and these commissioners. I'm giving a metaphorical example. This is an example. We don't want to have a situation where this so-called back end, whatever it is, only one person or 2 people have access to it, and therefore have the potential to make any alterations. Remember, we are dealing with an institution where, you know, there are allegations that there were over 200 attempts to hack into that system. So these are the questions that I think need to be addressed. They've not been addressed before, and this is always, for me, yes, it's a tiring process. Yes, people want to move on. But it's also an opportunity to create jurisprudence so that in the next election, whether it's a by-election, whether it's a presidential election, we are streamlining this process so that in the next 2-3 election cycles, some of these kinks in the system will have been smoothened so that we're not coming back over and over again addressing the same issues. So even these numbers, I feel that those issues that they raised, in as much as we might say, you know, they're from this divide, I feel that is a very simplistic way of looking at things, saying they were bought, and yes, they may have been bought, but are the issues they're raising, long after they're gone, IEBC will still remain? Will the issues they have raised about the IEBC as an independent institution, will they have been smoothened? I think for me, these are the larger things that we need to be looking at and questioning and debating and addressing.
Professor Sihanya, just on what, and I think this will be my last question on this, still on the issue of numbers,
Yes.
Did Chebukati make that announcement prematurely? We're looking at the 2017 election. You said you participated in that. You were part of, you know, that whole process of what happened in 2017. I'm just looking at the numbers. That was before the annulment of that election. Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto won by a popular vote of 8.2 million. Raila and Kalonzo 6.8. That's a difference of 1,400,000 plus, which then in terms of percentages gives Uhuru and Ruto a 54.17% and Raila and Kalonzo 44.94%. The percentage is big enough, the margin is big enough. In this case, because we're all talking about it was too close to call, and the chair would have waited to just do all the tallies, complete the tallying of everything before making that announcement. Did he make that announcement prematurely? Because looking at what the 4 commissioners are arguing, I'm just quoting what Advocate Charles Kanjama said, the fact that there were commissioners who declined to associate themselves with the results does not make the results invalid. And then there are also all these issues around disagreements and quorum at the IEBC, which are, you know, emerging. They may not necessarily form any grounds for petition, but looking at the numbers, did Chebukati make that announcement too early?
Okay, thank you. A brief 3-pronged response to that. Number 1, Article 138(3)(c) requires to be read. I've been referring to it and many have referred to it. Some have even actually denied the way Mr. Kanjama is talking, that it's the IEBC chair's job, full stop. No other person or no commissioner ought not to participate. That Article 138(3)(c) is written in plain, ordinary English. In a presidential election, the route is procedure at presidential election. Right. In a presidential election, after counting the votes in the polling stations, the Independent and the Boundaries Commission, not the chair, IEBC, shall tally and verify the count and declare the result. Nothing can be clearer than that. And then later on in 10, that's when you come, 138:10, that's when you come to the chair being mentioned. So if the people of Kenya and the consumer wanted to give that job exclusively of telling and verification to the chair,
Yes,
nothing would have been, as lawyers say, nothing would have been easier to say chair, because they've said it in 10.
Yes, and there's
So it is the commission, and that's a lot Kizungu mingi na Kiswahili mingi. It's just the commission has the duty to do that. It's not the chair. The chair here is acting mainly administratively, not executively. He doesn't have complete, full, absolute discretion on declaration. He declares based on a process of verification and tallying done by the commission. Number 2 is that you referred to 2017. Of course, we must start from the point that those figures were null and void.
Yes.
They were voided. They were invalidated by the Supreme Court. So those are just numbers out there. They were not votes. But assume they were votes, then you would say that the percentage was reasonably comfortable to justify the declaration on the basis of numbers. But you know, the court said, I think the summary of that determination, the summary was very important, referring to the court and God, and then saying that an election is not just an event, it's not just the numbers, it's also a process. Exactly. And we've been arguing on this. I've also been stationed at Bombas for most of the week. And it's about a process.
Yes.
And we've even said it this morning. It's a process. It's not just, you don't just go to the numbers. You say that. And the process includes what? The commission's role in telling and voting. That's part of the process. Then lastly, grant me 30 seconds to talk about international relations and this issue of congratulated remittances. 3 brief ones.
Can I just interject briefly?
Yes, please.
That same article that you talk about,
yes.
I'm quite curious.
Yes.
Because it also says, in that exact same article,
yes.
In terms of the commission,
yes.
it also uses the word declare.
Yes.
So it seems like the word declare
yes.
is used in Article 138C in regard to the commission,
yes.
and then it's also used in the other article.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one because it reinforces the fact that the commissioners are not just good English boys to be seen and not to be heard. They are participating in the declaration process. And mind you, it's not using the word announce.
It says
announce is with respect to presidential election, announce is a lower level.
Right.
For example, you are to announce at the polling station level and you are to announce at the constituency level, right. The PO and the returning officer. But declare is a very firm word, strong word, which says that so and so. On the basis of this, registered voters, valid votes cast, right. 25% into at least 24 counties.
Right.
On the basis of that, so you don't just come and say that. I've looked at the results from polling stations and counties, polling stations and constituencies, and also the 25% yes. from counties, and I declare. No, you have to give those specific numbers in which the commission will have participated in telling and varying. So that's a very good addition. So lastly for me in that issue of congratulatory messages, there are so many ways of, at least 3 ways of looking at it. Number one is that this is part of international relations, diplomacy and foreign policy. And most African countries, and most countries actually in the world, generally focus, or they want to maintain good relations with yes. other states.
Yes.
Right. And I think that many times you normally see that there must be a mention of we congratulate the people of Kenya, the people of Uganda, the people of Tanzania, because it's about state sovereignty in international law, international relations. Right. That you know, they are sovereign, they are equal, and they exist, irrespective of who the alleged leader is. They are there. So that takes me to the second issue, number 2. There is the question of recognition of states and recognition of governments and recognition of presidents.
Right. Yes.
For a long time, up to I think maybe late 70s, there's some countries who used to even say that we recognize this state, but we don't recognize it. I think like the Israeli-Palestinian issue, yes. the Eritrea issue, the South Sudan issue, right. that we don't recognize that as a state as well. But then the UN generally tries to help an AU and AU now. Then there is the recognition of government. Do we recognize that government? And I think the government or the head of state. Right. And you remember in 2008 we had this problem that immediately the results were announced at midnight with candlelight. the question was that it's only Somalia, the famous one. Somalia, I think, the Zimbabwe under Mugabe, who are quick to recognize. And therefore there were issues there. Lastly for me, because others were saying we are not recognizing any. Correct. Yeah, but we congratulate the people of Kenya. Okay. So the Vienna Convention on the law of treaties, the Vienna Convention on diplomatic and consular relations, as well as AU. OAU used to be soft spot, the way you explained. Yeah, you explained that, you know, I think both of you explained that. Is it, I think you also explained that, is it about real politics?
Yes.
Especially among AU and OU countries.
Yes, yes.
A club like, you know. But so those are some of the dynamics of recognition. Yes. There shouldn't be too much heavy weather on that. Right. Because there's a sense in which people feel that states want to still continue relating,
which is okay,
and then it's good. They think it's good international relations behavior.
Protocol.
Yes,
yes,
definitely. Yeah. So they want to still continue doing business.
Okay, but on the question of the role of the IEBC chairman vis-a-vis the entity that is the commission, as far as the announcement and the declaration of results, just to bring in a different voice, we have Ahmed Syria Abdullahi. He tweeted this on August the 15th at 4:40 p.m. and he said a presidential election has, and he typed this out in caps, a single returning officer, the chairman. Other commissioners have no role in a presidential election. So Senior Counsel Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi, speaking of another senior counsel now from the other side of the divide, these two like taking each other on.
Right.
Professor Makau Mutua, who says any results IEBC Kenya Wafula Chebukati announces are invalid because he had no quorum of commissioners to hold a plenary and make such a weighty decision. The ongoing process at Bomas is now, again, he's also typed it out in caps,
right.
illegal. So, but the argument could be made that he who calls the piper calls the tune across the board, Professor Mike.
Yeah, and I think that I think in future disputes amongst lawyers and advocates should be mediated by architects because we are, as Prof says, it's plain English and you can actually see it. You see, because we know Ahmed Nasir is linked with the Kenya Kwanza side and most likely might even represent them in court. And we know that Professor Makau is linked with the Azimio side and might represent them in court. So I look at this as legal posturing so that somebody does not say anything that might undermine their side when it actually comes to the case. Exactly. And in this particular instance, you find a situation where, of course, and that's how the Ben and team operate. So that's how that trade operates. You don't interpret the law in a way that disadvantages your client, as it actually were. But for us, of the plain English bit and laymen, mere mortals in the space of law, we are not even considered learned despite our titles. I just go back to the text, and that is the 138, 138.3, and then 138.10. And you see, myself, I never really have a problem, arguing a position on the basis of the information that I have. And this says quite clearly that after voting, after counting the votes, the IBC shall tally, verify, and declare. That is 138.3. It says IBC. It does not even make reference to the IBC chair. And the question we are asking is that what is IBC? Who is IBC? Is it the IBC chair? And then 138.10 talks about declaration by the chairman. And for me, in terms of pure reading of English, it seems that the IBC commissioners are not just some flower girls or altar boys. In this entire process, they seem to the IBC seem to have been given a very clear mandate beyond the chairman in that 138.3. And I'm reading this not as a legal expert. I'm reading this as somebody who actually also got an A in English, and I'm very proud of that, and the 10. So I think what will be happening, if you're looking at this thing from a public point of view, and again, I would like to advise both parties that, look here, if I go to a lawyer, it is an advocate, it's part of their responsibility to defend me the best way possible. So even as you are listening to these sides, in fact, I think you need to listen to both sides, and yes, these provisions, the Constitution, they're not too many. And as Ben has freed us, it is written in plain English. So go and read it for yourself.
And I will open it for us to read it for ourselves. Dennis, just a quick one before you come in. Yes. Carol, think about this. ELOG gives the nod to election results. You talked about, the talk should not just be about accepting it and moving on. But do these reports from observer groups, how much weight do they carry as far as the legitimacy of the presidential election results, Dennis?
Just adding to what Oliver said, everybody was doing these counts. ILOG was doing their counts.
Yes.
There's so many other groups that are doing their counts, and they've been posting the Excel sheets and their tallies on the internet. The media houses are doing their tallies as well. And if you look at the trend of all these different groups, they somewhat arrived around same figures. Just a difference of just decimal points of the small percentages. But to what Prof was saying in terms of simple basic English, I'm a journalist, not a lawyer. But looking at Article 138, and I want to engage the three of you on this, Article 138.3 Part C, which I think, Prof, you were quoting, it says, after counting the votes in the polling stations, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission shall tally and verify the count and declare the result.
Yes.
But then when you drop down to part 10, then it then says within 7 days, the presidential after the presidential election, the chairperson. Now we go to specific. It's the chairperson of the IEBC who then shall declare the result of the election. Are you seeing an issue with these two parts, in the sense that in part 1, which, and I'm referring this to what the 4 commissioners were saying yesterday, they are not party to the final declaration and the results. It's Chebukati's results. But part C then says, after counting the votes at the polling stations, the IEBC shall tally and verify the count and declare the result. It then is not very specific whether it's tallying, verifying the total count of everything, then declare the results. It leaves it open. So then can Chebukati then argue, his lawyers argue and say, well, the chair, at the point what Carol was referring, the sweet spot of the 50+1, when the chair looked at the numbers and already Ruto had hit that mark,
they made sense.
Then he was at liberty and the law protects him, and what we have read, for him to declare the election and just call it. But then the last part, which then says that is the chairperson who shall declare the result of the election. Are these two things confusing? Because, like I said, I'm not a lawyer.
Are they confusing to you?
They're confusing to me because the first part, part 3, says it's the IEBC commission that shall tally, verify the count, and declare the result. The part 10 says it's the chairperson of the IEBC. Does this then, I just want to engage you on this English. Does this then leave Chebukati to be right, and the other people are opposing him also they are right?
Can I start with the English and then as it builds up to the legalese? Because I think the way I would interpret it myself in terms of English is that the 138 3C, that bit of tallying and verifying and so on, basically tells us the role of IBC in that particular process. And then I think I would look at 138.10 as a detail. How does is this declaration done? Can any, for example, can any member of the IBC declare results? For example, I mean, in terms of the final declaration, who makes that final declaration? So I think you see, I mean, I think it's like saying that let's use the university for example. That you're saying a department shall examine and do this and eventually give whatever determine whether a student is passing or failing. But then you're saying when it comes to the award of the degree, that pronouncement shall be done by the Vice Chancellor of a university. So using that analogy, the question is, can a Chancellor of a university award a degree without the department and the schools and so on? So for me, the way I would read it in terms of plain English is that you've got the general principles and you got the general approach, and then you have the detail. I'll look at 138.10 as a detail. That yes, we're saying the university awards the degree, but then you're saying, but who eventually pronounces that Omenya has gotten this particular degree? And you're saying that person is a Vice Chancellor.
But Prof, shouldn't this have been very clear from the word go? Because the lawyers are split. You've seen what Olive was looking at, the two tweets of Ahmed Nasser and Makau Mutua. Of course, they're both representing their sides. But you look at the arguments, and each of them keeps saying the law is very clear. But
I think that's the nature of the law, that you actually start with the Constitution that establishes those unrefutable principles, but does not actually flesh out the details. And then you end up with legislation that then details those principles much further so that they can actually be applied. And then in terms of operations, you end up with regulations. But even having done that, you will still always have gaps. And these gaps can be all the way from the Constitution or the Mother Act or in the regulations. And through practice then, and that's where Ben and his team of lawyers come in, those gaps then become the issues that are normally, canvassed and discussed in these courts in terms of their role in terms of interpreting the law, and through that, then of course we end up with case law, we end up with jurisprudence, and sometimes we even end up with directions that this should be done in this and that way and so on, and then we decide that can this problem be cured, for example, by updating the regulations? Yes. Can it be cured by amendments to the Act? Can they be cured now by, say, constitutional amendment? Yes. And that's partly why I think this case then becomes important in the sense that a gap has already been identified, and not just lawyers but the entire country is actually debating this particular gap, and then this will go to the Constitution. The Constitution will give a direction on this particular matter, and then that way we'll see whether it's clear because of the interpretation of the Supreme Court, or there are further directions in terms of getting the clarity. And as Dr. Moser was saying, it means that we're actually getting better in terms of our process and so on. So those who are actually saying Azimio people should consider and go away are not understanding the value that these particular processes contribute towards the broader clarification of questions that come in terms of how the IEBC conducts itself, in terms of regulations, in terms of the Mother Act, all the way to the Constitution.
Okay, and Dennis, as I see Dr. Mose has something to contribute to add to what Dr. Prof. Omenya was saying on the subject. But Dennis, you're saying the confusion is where? I have a copy of the Constitution open on my touch screen here. You said Article 138?
Yes.
Which section?
Yes. Section C.
3C. And it says, after counting the votes in the polling station, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission shall tally and verify the count and declare the result. Okay, and then? The one you said is, which is bringing you confusion. 10.
Part A.
10, Part A. Within 7 days after the presidential election, the chairperson of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission shall A, declare the result of the election, and B, deliver a written notification of the result to the Chief Justice and the incumbent president. Dr. Mase.
So if you look at the two tweets by the senior counsel, they have truths and speculations. So a part of the tweets are actually stating what is in the law.
What you've just read.
What you've just read. And parts of that are also, they go into the speculative. And the reason I say that is the declarations they're making from the interpretations of the law, at the end of the day, there is no jurisprudence, there is no precedent. Because, like I've said, this is our third cycle of elections after the promulgation of the new constitution in 2010. That means we have never been in a situation where majority even or even a part of the IEBC commissioners openly dissent and distance themselves from what their chair or what the other remaining commissioners are doing. So in that case, this is new. So when they say that, what is going on at Bomas is illegal because there is no quorum, that part of quorum is not addressed. If you look at the screen, that part of quorum is not addressed there. No part in this act is saying there must be quorum for the IEBC chair to announce the elections. However, that part of the IEBC shall, it shall conduct, it shall tally, and do all those things. That part is clear. But the part of quorum has not been addressed, as far as we can see when we look at what is on the screen right now. So that's part one. When the other one says that, there is no legal leg to stand on because it is the sole mandate of the chair. There is a part in that act, which I think is part 13, is part 10, 138.10, says it's the mandate of the chair of the IEBC. Right. So are these two areas in cross purposes with each other? No. And I think I think the answer is yes and no. And I think going to court to seek clarification from the Supreme Court is a good idea. Correct. Why? Because I am hoping that at the Supreme Court, when all these things are addressed, part of what will be addressed will be what is the difference between the chair as an institution and the IEBC as an institution. Where does one end and where does the other begin, or vice versa? What are the responsibilities of the IEBC as a whole entity vis-a-vis, what Prof to my right was saying, vis-a-vis the roles of individuals and the institution of the chair? Because if you look at the two sections, they appear to be contradicting one another in a way. And I believe this is where, because we've never had this situation before. In the past, it was, we have all these, it's IEBC as a commission, including the chair and the commissioners. And if there was any dissent, it was said after the fact when people resigned and some fled the country, etc., etc. We've never had this before, and I'm hoping the court pronounces itself to make this clear. And why is this important? It is important for these two things to be addressed. Again, I am a big fan of looking ahead. We don't want to come back here and say, where does the chair begin? Or where do does the commission, and the commissioners end and the chair begin? What is the role of the chair in declaring? Again, the role of the chair in part 10 is very clear that he will declare the result. But when you go to part 3, yes, it talks about the process, the tallying.
That leads to that
and that leads to the declaration.
The commission will declare.
So again, going back to what Prof on my right was talking about, the process vis-a-vis the outcome. These things need to be made very clear. Who is involved in the process? Up to what point does all these people involved, up to what point do we say this is where the involvement of the commissioners of the IEBC end in terms of the process? And therefore, what is the role of the chair as an institution within the IEBC in declaring the final result? So it is both the process and the outcome. These things have to be very clear. We don't have that clarity, it appears, because learned friends and senior counsel are interpreting. They are using the law, but I think there's a point at which they are going speculative, because we don't have precedent in law based on what is currently going on with these commissioners dissenting and etc. So that is what I feel. To go to your question, are these parts contradicting one another? Yes and no. And I think that's part of what the Supreme Court must declare in itself. So either we do, an amendment to the Act, or what Prof was talking about, a constitutional review of that section, or just going to the regulations and saying, in terms of process, in terms of this is what the commissioners are supposed to do. But the outcome, the declaration is solely, of course, it's there in the it's there. That is going to be the sole responsibility of the chair. These things must, I think the Supreme Court will declare itself and give interpretations so that we have a precedent.
Okay, and before I see Dennis reading the fine print, and they say the devil is in the details. Before Professor Sihanya comes and weighs in with his legal mind, we take a break, but also do not forget Caroline, Dr. Mose, that I had asked you what weight, and let me raise this so that you can see it full screen better. What weight do the observer reports carry as far as the legitimacy of the presidential election result is concerned? We're coming back with AM Live on the other side of this break.
I know that Riara University is going to make my dreams come true.
Registration is ongoing.
Jina langu ni Bire the Vocalist, na kupata wimbo huu kama sikiza tune yako ni jambo rahisi sana. Bonyeza *812*802 na Mungu atawabariki. Skiza na Nation, supporting local talent.
Mimi naona wengine wangekam tu.
To make sure ni closed casket.
Najua lakini si wangekam tu.
Ndio kuja muone vile amebomolewa uso.
Oh my goodness. Sasa ni hiyo manzi.
Ona sasa. Hata kuongea tu amwezi. Unafikiri mnaweza handle kumuona?
Kwani anaenda na wale? Sisi ndio familia yake, anafaa kuwa na sisi hapa.
Walimpenda pia.
Walimpenda na hata wao mzee angekubali Mike awe msichana wake.
Magic.
Welcome back to AM Live, and we're looking forward to the Supreme Court of Kenya and the issues that have already emerged as far as the press briefings given by the various sides and the tweets that have been flying about on social media. Prof. Sihanya, law professor, Dennis had said he finds Article 138. Where did I open it? Here we go. Here's my constitution. And he says he's confused by Article 138, Section 3, subsection C, which states after counting the votes in the polling station, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission shall tally and verify the count and declare the results. But he says Section 10 of the same Article 138 continues to state that the chairperson of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission shall declare the result of the election.
So, thank you so much. And viewers, this is a very important debate which will reverberate into the future. So, you can see that in the panel there's consensus on the question of IEBC's role vis-a-vis IEBC chair's role, or the National Returning Officer in the question of declaration. There is consensus, and the summary is that the role of the commissioners is important because they are referring to the chairperson of what? Of the commission. And the commission includes the commissioners. And when you go to IEBC Act and you go to the schedule, it tells how they must do their business as a commission. And so I have a duty as a constitutional professor and advocate to distinguish between constitutional methodology and constitutional rumor-mongering. Because Kanjama and Ahmed Nasir are engaged in constitutional rumor-mongering. Because if you want to engage, and this is Con Law 101, Constitutional Law 101, Con Law 101, which basically tells us what Mao Zedong told us many years ago, that without research, you should not speak. You don't just make statements, especially if you are a professional. Yeah. So and the methodology is very simple. It's three-pronged. Text, structure, history. What English interpretation law calls plain meaning or ordinary meaning, golden rule, and mischief rule. This simply means this. You must start with the text. Yes. And especially as a professional, and particularly as a lawyer, before you speak, you make a statement, a conclusion. You refer us to the text, and we have been referring here to 138, 3, and 138, 10. Yes. They are not referring to anything. Yeah. That's rumor-mongering. And then, if the text is clear, you let it be as it is. Yes. But then, if there is some ambiguity, ambivalence, or equivocation, then you go to what is called the golden rule, which means that really, is there an absurdity? But there's no absurdity in 138 and 138.3 and 138.10. There's no absurdity. It's as clear as it can be. There is no lack of, there is no ambivalence, etc. There is no contradiction. So you just remain with the text as it is. That is normally called the golden rule. Then there is what is called the mischief rule, which is also called history. I also call it history and practice. You then say what was the mischief that we were trying to resolve? Why did the people of Kenya, and why does the Constitution talk of IEBC in 138.3, but when it comes to 138.10, talks about what? The chairperson of the commission. And by the way, for the avoidance of doubt about this control of mamongering, it doesn't say there national returning officer.
No,
It doesn't.
Which they have manufactured. It says chairperson. Chairperson of what? Because then they have been running to say that as a national returning officer, returning officers don't have to refer to anybody. But that's also wrong. Returning officers must work within the structure of the commission.
Yes, that's true.
They are agents of the commission. They are not entities, entities in their own right.
Correct. That's true.
So here at the language, one must emphasize chairperson of the commission. Is the language the national returning officer? You've been. We have all read it. I think that close loudly.
Exactly. Correct.
It's not national returning officer. It is chairperson. Chairperson of what? Commission. And what is a commission? IEBC. How does it work? Schedule in the IEBC Act. How does it work? Majority, unanimity. Sorry, first unanimity or consensus. If that failing, majority. Yes, please.
But Prof, on that argument, is Chebukati then announcing these results as chair of IEBC or the presidential returning officer of both?
National returning officer is an administrative statement, which is not in the law.
It's not enshrined in law.
Right.
And itself can have can be questioned. So that's why I think I really like the way there is consistency in 138.3 and 10, because 10 is commission and they have even a mandate to declare. Yes, correct. But then because declaration is a pronouncement, proclamation.
Correct.
Not all 7 commissioners can sit there and I say this, I say this. This is the House of Bubble, yeah?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, we want some order.
Yes,
it's administrative. So that let's ask one of us, the question is asking, one of us.
And which one?
Which one? The chairperson, not the national returning officer.
Exactly.
The person, please now declare it on behalf of the commission with the authority of.
Dennis, Andika notes. Andika, 1, plain reading of the text. 2, golden rule. Andika notes.
Yeah, so that we all belong to the same tribe of methodology rather than Bamangare.
Golden rule. 3, mischief rule.
Mischief rule.
Let him percolate on that for a moment.
Mischief rule.
And I think before I finalize that, just one last comment on that. Then if Mr. Chebukati as the chairperson, or now they are calling him only national returning officer, felt that it was really him and him alone who was to tally and verify. Yeah. Why did they convene as at Bomas with agents and with the commission? Number one. Yeah. Number 2, why did he sign on every page, the protocol, which had the role of the agents and also the role of commissioners? And I know that there are regulations. The election in bracket, general regulations 2022, which is a regulation 87. Which mentions now that the commission, the chairperson of the commission will do this. But the chairperson, whenever you mention the chairperson of the commission, Maina Kia has told us that must work within the context of the commission. However you want to read it. Correct. Once you mention chairperson of the commission, you already mentioned a commission. Exactly. It means that they must work within the structure of what? The commission, not as individuals.
So, Prof, there are 7 commissioners, right?
Yes, please.
So minus the 4, is it still an IEBC commission?
I think, was that not decided in the BBI judgment?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Because BBI saying this, and I've also seen the Rumamunga saying that, but BBI had resolved the issue of quorum, and therefore 3 can decide. No. Yeah. BBI is Supreme Court, and I was involved in it, the process. BBI correctly, Supreme Court correctly said that if you read the constitutional provision, general provisions on commissions, they were saying that commission quorum shall be 3. Generally, okay, because I think they wanted to stabilize this issue. There may be problems into the future on thinking about that, if you have a 9-member commission. But then there's a difference between quorum, which is the minimum to make a decision, and those who then will carry the day. And then the schedule to IEBC Act specifies that, okay, the quorum can be that 3, not as big problem. But when you are deciding, you must decide. There must be a minimum of 3 for you to in other words, for you to deliberate on anything affecting the commission, functions, powers, and what is called business. And business has been interpreted by a judge in Kenya to include those issues of functions. So it's not just buying and selling, it's any of the powers and functions. And the most important power and function of IEBC in this country, because of our politics, is the declaration of election results, especially of that of the president. And therefore, 3 is a quorum, but then, a minimum, then when you want to decide, you must be unanimous, or you must have consensus of all those who are there in the commission. And therefore, and if you don't do that, and the commissioners were there, they were always there. And if you want to do that, you must have a unanimity or consensus, and if there is no consensus or unanimity, then majority. And definitely 4 over 7 is the majority. So 3 can't decide for 7.
Just a quick rejoinder on that minor care ruling. And I'm just reading, it actually reiterates what Prof is saying here, that there is nothing, in fact, let me just read it verbatim. It says, the commissioner, the commission chairman has conducted the election as though he is a national returning officer, a non-existent role. The rule actually, that particular minor care says so, that is a non-existent role, and then it proceeds to say that his role in declaring results that were not approved by a plenary of all 7 commissioners renders the results unconstitutional to the extent that, that these are Chebukati's results as opposed to those of IEBC. Per Article 138.2, as per the Constitution, there is no national presidential election. Those are additional things. This comes towards the end of the ruling, but in fact it reiterates what Prof is actually saying here. That
does that then open the door for this argument where Kenyans will say, we went out to vote, but then it appears there is another vote over our vote, and that is the IEBC Commission. So. Because this is a political process, in the event that you know, the 1 or 2 or 3 disagree, then that means those 3 have a vote over our vote. So is that then a loophole? Because you're looking at the composition of the commission. Obviously, it's a political process. But then once people have voted, and still going back to the minor care case, the results that have been announced at the polling station, they are final.
They're final, correct.
But then when you come now to the quorum of the composition of the commission in agreeing that this is the tally that we agree with, if 2 or 3, and in this case 4, have dissented and they said we're not part of this result, then does that give them extra powers and an extra vote over our vote?
No. Yes, in a way we would say it this way. It's not that they are disregarding.
Correct.
They're not disregarding our votes. I think that's the mistake that some of the Romamongers are making. Yes. They are not that disregarding our votes. They have to do tallying and verification. Based on what? Based on what came from the polling stations, 34A, and based on what came from the constituencies. They are not manufacturing their own data. They are not saying, for me, I vote for this candidate. For me, I vote for... No, that's not what is here.
Exactly.
And I think that those things so I think it's the same way a court, but a court of law, by the way, under the Constitution and under the Elections Act, can these days say that although it was A who was declared the winner, actually, after scrutiny and after verifying this data, we find that actually B should have been declared the winner, and therefore we declare B. This was an amendment following on the 2010 Constitution. A long time ago, the court could only nullify an election and you go back. But these days, if there is a question of numbers, which means that IEBC commissioners have power, which it is us, by the way, let's not forget. This constitution is from us. It's not, and the provisions are from us. It's the people who decided that after we have voted, we can't all of us, 46 million Kenyans, 48 million Kenyans, congregate at Bomas or at KICC to verify or nor can we vote the way Greek city-states you could make those decisions in town halls
directly
because they were few, and also they not everybody. Yeah, you had to be a man, you had to have property, etc. So we cannot all come back and come to Nairobi and vote or wherever it is. Nor can we come all of us to tally and verify. Therefore, that power was given to the commission. The same way we have given courts powers, the judges powers to check our election results and say, determine who actually won. Because we are running constitutional democracy, con democracy. Democracy, the power of the people. Con, under rules. And the rules are that we exercise our powers as people in voting. But we also recognize that somebody else has the technical and other relevant expertise, in this case the commissioners, and we have delegated to them the power. If we think that they should not verify and tally, then we should amend that constitution. But before we amend to 138.3 and 138.10, the commission as a commission, as the chairperson acting with the authority of the commission, not on his own frolic, must help us to interlink verification and declaration. And please note, 138.3 and 10 both have declaration. It's not a confusion. And I think it was deliberate that this declaration is such a powerful issue. It's a proclamation. It's telling us who our next president is going to be for the 5 years. It's not something that we can just give to one person. It's such a powerful tool. Please.
But those two things are what is now currently leading to the split of law.
But it's because they're not following basic
law is clear.
Okay, and
the law is clear.
For those of us who are hearing Mainakiai, we're asking what was said in this Mainakiai case. We have the Court of Appeal judgment open before us, and so this is what the judges decided. Accuracy of the count is fundamental in any election. Voter turnout determines the outcome of any electoral contest. Numbers are not only unimpeachable, but they're everything in an election. The lowest voting unit and the first level of declaration of presidential election results is the polling station. The declaration form containing those results is a primary document, and all other forms subsequent to it are only tallies of the original and final results recorded at the polling station. Dennis, if you take the second paragraph.
So it continues to say, we reiterate as we conclude that there is no doubt from the architecture of the laws we have considered that the people of Kenya did not intend to vest or concentrate such sweeping and boundless powers in one individual, the chairperson of the appellant. The responsibility of the appellant to deliver a credible and acceptable election in accordance with the Constitution is so grave and so awesome that it must approach and execute it with absolute fealty, probity, and integrity. The appellant must in all its dealings be truly above suspicion and command respect of the people of Kenya for whom it acts. Much depends on it, indeed, the present and future peace of the country.
Pure poetry, pure.
But as we wrap things up, Caroline, Dr. Mose, I wanted you to weigh in on this. ELOG gives the nod to election results. They're carrying out what Dennis, the abbreviation was PVT, parallel vote tally. What weight do these observer reports carry?
I think it depends. The answer to that question is it depends or to whom. And let me say this, that there were the people you're calling the PVTs. Because this time round, all the forms 34A were on the portal, and anybody could access them, anybody could download them, anybody could begin the tallying process. That's the difference between now and 2017. So we had credible, of course we had the partisan groups that were trying to do tallying to show that their candidate was ahead. You know, we had those, but we also had the independent ones. And for me, and I must say this, regardless of whatever is going on out there, I must say this, that majority of these PVTs actually came to the same conclusion. When they were done with the numbers showed the same result. Now, the question now there becomes, when it comes back to these commissioners, these 4 dissenting commissioners, when they begin to talk about how close the tally was, that the difference in percentages, if one of these tallying folk came out with 40-something 0.5 and another one came with 0.7, that small decimal point, what does it translate to? That now becomes the question. But we must say this, that the announcement that was made by the chair seems to have been supported by a majority of the PVTs. We must say that we had very many independent tallying bodies, and they came to more or less the same conclusion. So that was going to be the starting point. That is not just the IEBC that was doing the tallying, but also all these other people. But if everybody else was getting their data from the IEBC, then the issues go back to the IEBC in terms of the data. The issues that these 4 commissioners raised, we cannot ignore them. That these small decimal points actually translate to X number of votes. That if the PVTs counted up to an X number of constituencies, because not all the constituencies had been released, as per what these 4 commissioners are saying. Of course, the Forms 34A were all uploaded up to 100%. So all these other things, like, you know, we've just read that B and C are usually the conclusions of A. So if A forms were all available and everybody was doing the tallying and it came to this, you know, the result appeared to be uniform across the board, that is something that, you know, there will be some weight to that. Because it shows even if we go back and start counting again and start tallying, if we restart the process, we are likely to get the same result. That must be said. Does that dispel what these 4 commissioners are saying? They're raising questions about the back end. They're raising questions about the veracity of the A forms. Then these are questions that we have to address. But what that does not also negate that E-log and the rest, what they were doing, it came to the same conclusion. That will have some weight, because at the end of the day, was this vote, did majority of voters vote for the president-elect? That the answer to that question from E-log and from all these other independent PVTs seem to suggest that the answer to that question is yes. But was the process and the, you know, the tallying process and the declaration process, is that what we need to be focusing on? That, I think, will be a matter, like I've said, for the Supreme Court to declare itself.
Okay, we have to end this conversation at this point, gentlemen, because I have seen
I think this is really serious, because
it is serious.
This is a serious issue that I think we need to
yes.
So, yes, 3-pronged response to issue of A-log.
In a minute.
In a 1 minute. 1 minute. Number 1, the question of process matters, and they take this into account. They themselves also acknowledge that because data is also a question of process. It's not just the numbers.
Right.
And Raila 2017 told us that. They acknowledge that they only observed a few situations. Number 2 is the question of the integrity of the data that was itself posted on the portal. There are serious fundamental questions which have been raised there, etc. Some forms without signature, some forms were plain, etc., etc.
Yes.
So it's a question, not just a question of numbers, but also process and also the qualitative verification. Lastly, we've been here before, and there have been standard forms in terms of observation. Most of the observers have just been saying, oh, the electoral process was okay. It was peaceful. Peace is the main thing. Therefore, electoral justice sometimes is secondary. Correct. Which is unfortunate. And then they said it was okay. And by African standards, they used to use that language. It was okay. But please note, this is it. This is the point. Observers most of the observers in 2017 were unanimous. What did the Supreme Court say?
Okay. Prof, we'll leave it there. And Prof. Omenya, I'll ask people to refer back to what you said yesterday. This clip is on our NTV Kenya YouTube channel. When you said you just don't just win and lose, how you win and lose also matters. So process is what I'm hearing from the process matters. Okay, mpenzi mtazamaji. Naomba utuitikishe ufanye nini?
So that's where we all wind it up. Many thanks for being part of the AM Live, and we give room for to Winnie to come and continue the conversation.
Aya, Winnie Lubembe, usukani kwako. Jina langu ni Olive Barrow.
I'm Dennis Okari.
Good morning.